Guess what we just experienced? A holy moment. That was a holy moment. A holy moment is any moment when you're in the midst of contemplating hard things, in the middle of contemplating sad, hard, difficult things, and in the middle of feeling like you're surrounded by death, life bursts down the door. That's how you know you're in a holy moment. Earlier this summer, we lost a parishioner who'd been here for years. She was the mother of 7. She'd actually taught science for a while at our school back in the 80s, and she was fiercely independent. And she was very proud to have been married to her husband for 70 years and to have raised those kids and always been able to depend on herself. And maybe that's why she hid the fall that she had from her kids. And by the time her daughter realized that she was not doing well and brought her to the doctor, it was hospice almost right away. And she was mad because she was independent. And she thought that she would just keel over one day. She didn't want to lay in a bed and have people take care of her. And the thing she was maddest about is she said, this timing is very inconvenient. Dying in the summer, she said, my garden is at its best. She'd always had a garden, vegetable garden and flower garden, and she loved that garden, and she was annoyed that she wasn't able to weed it and water it and enjoy it. She said, I can't believe this is happening now, while my garden is so beautiful. And so she moved into her daughter's house, into the guest room, kind of feeling defeated a little bit. And her grandson knew that she felt that way. And so what he did one night is he went over to their house in South Glens Falls, and he dug up her garden, and he transplanted it outside the window of the guest room of his mom's house. And then that next morning, they said, wake up, Nana. Wake up, you got to greet the day. And they pulled up the blinds, and there was her garden. I don't need to explain to you what that felt like for them. I wasn't there. They told me about it. And now I'm telling you about it. And we don't need to have been there. We know. Life busted through the window. Life didn't knock at the door. It took the door off its hinges right in the middle of death. She died 5 days later. And she died having experienced a holy moment that no one who hears it can forget about. A holy moment is anytime we collaborate with God. And it's when we allow God to do the things that only God can do, and we take responsibility for the things that we can do, like that grandson did for his grandmother. He couldn't change her diagnosis, but he could bring life into the midst of that time of dying. And that's what's so great about a holy moment, is it never requires us to do the impossible. It's always in the realm of possibility. God will do the impossible. We'll do our part. The grandson could only dig up flowers and plant them again. Only God could create a garden right outside the window of someone who missed her garden. And this is where we realize that for a lot of us, we've been spending time working on the wrong things, because a lot of us have gotten into the mindset that it's our job to save people. And it's not. That's God's job. Have you ever gotten into that place where maybe you have a relative or a loved one who's in crisis, and you're trying to find ways to save them? You're trying to find ways to rescue them, and it never works because it's above our pay grade. We can't do it. We can't save anybody. We can't save ourselves. Only God can do that. And if we start thinking that it's our job, we have to realize that's not our job. And even when we do good works, even when we're trying to do good things, we don't do it with the sense that we're here to save ourselves. It's the opposite. We're here to spend ourselves. Our job is to spend. God's job is to save. God does the saving. We do the spending. We do our part, and God does the rest. And I don't need to explain that in any words either. It just happened. It just happened. What we do is we allow God to put an idea in our minds. We just don't block figuring out if God wants to give us the most beautiful possible idea that we could ever come up with. Sometimes it's inconvenient. God will say, you know what you ought to do? And you're like, no, don't start. But you know that is God saying, you know what you ought to do? And if we do that, that's a collaboration with God. We can't save people, but we can plant flowers. We can't undo what has happened in anyone's life, but we can do something in this moment that's the most beautiful version of this moment there could be. Nothing impossible. We're not asked to do the impossible, just the possible. There was a man who, like the woman I talked about earlier in South Glens Falls, had a terminal diagnosis. And it was one of those things that was progressive, and so every time his friends would see him, he was a little worse. He was a little less mobile. He was a little more confined. And that really bothered him because he wanted to be hospitable. He was the best host ever, and so he was always making sure that that little jar of pickles that he knows you like were there if you were coming over, and he'd have them all laid out for you just right. And so when he got sick, he would try to still do that. And he would get up, and sometimes it would be labor for him to get up from the chair. And one of his friends one day said, no, relax, let me serve you. And he said, very kindly, very gently, when I take from you, he said, it feels like I'm dying. He said, when I give, I feel like I'm living. Can you relate to that at all? He's like, let me have my holy moment. This is all I can do, is struggle to get out of this chair and go over and get you a drink or hold the door for you. Don't tell me to relax. I want to do this. When I sit there, I feel like I'm dying. When I do something for you, I feel like I'm living. Let me bring some life into this chapter. A lot of you here know Professor Marion Slater. She's our school director at the school. A lot of our kids are here tonight. She's a firecracker. If you've worked with her, you know. Some of you, your eyes just got big. I know just as well as you do. Oh yeah, and you would never guess her age in a million years. And she's just remarkable because all of her friends now are retired. She said, all my friends are retired, and they play pickleball, and they take naps, and they go on cruises. And she said, I can't do it. She said, I can't do it. She goes, I'm not going to burn the gas in my tank like that. You can hear her saying that. She said, this world needs people who make a difference. And then when she said this to me, she sat back as only she can, and she goes, listen, Father, it comes down to this. How are you going to live your life? As a drip or a flow? What a question. How are we going to live? A drip or a flow? Do you want a drip out of your life? Drip, drip, drip. Or do you want it to flow? And you know the answer to that. And you know what it feels like when you're around a drip. And what it feels like when you're around a flow. What does that make you think of from your own life? Where in your life is there dripping going on? And where in your life is flowing going on? Even on the night before his death, Holy Thursday night, life was gushing forth from Jesus, just gushing like a geyser. And you would never know from what just happened that this was a man with a price on his head. That the most beautiful night was going to be followed by a night that no one could control. An experience that no one had the power to save him from. And so he spent himself. The same one who saved us because he was God spent himself for us because he was human. Imagine him refusing to save himself from the death that saves us. Instead, he spent himself. So this night would become holy forever. So that we would make this the night that we remember the founding of the original holy moment.